if we don't get these investment pieces right, if we don't have that whole spectrum from sort of the more ethical impact funds that can take that risk all the way through to hard-nosed private investment flowing, this is just not going to happen. That's the biggest risk here.
Welcome to The Greener Way. I'm your host, Rose Mary Petrass, Senior Journalist at FS Sustainability. We are recording on Gadigal land. We pay our respects to traditional custodians of country and elders past, present and emerging. Today we have Amanda Cahill joining us. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks for having me.
Amanda is the CEO of the Next Economy, which acts as a sort of intermediary between regional communities, governments, investors and industry to accelerate the transition to a climate-safe, socially just and regenerative economy. Amanda, what is a just transition?
Well, the term's been around for a while. I think it was first coined by the union movement, the international union movement. And it was really about making sure that we looked after workers, particularly in the coal industry, as the world started to decarbonise. These days, it's a broader definition, and we take it a step further. So, yes, we need to make sure we look after people directly impacted by changes in fossil fuels and the workers that are involved. But actually, we've got an opportunity now to look at how we can leave everyone better off. We're going to have to spend a lot of money to manage this decarbonisation process. So how do we do it in a way that communities are actually better off on the other side of this? We invest in the infrastructure that we need. We bring in other workers or people who've been excluded from employment. We make sure we don't lead to other negative impacts for First Nations people, for example, dispossession of land through renewable energy development. So it's an opportunity here to look at how we embrace economic change in a way that we're socially and environmentally responsible.
What's the biggest barrier to achieving a just transition? Is money not getting to where it's needed, or are there other factors at play here?
The biggest challenge is not very sexy to talk about, but it actually comes back to some basic things around planning and coordination. If there's investors listening, you think about what it takes and how big a task it is to ramp up one industry, let alone, manage a complete adaptation of one industry. So you think about what it takes to ramp up, say, LNG, the gas industry. We are trying to make change across every sector of the economy, decarbonise it, existing operations, as well as build the new industries that we need for the future. So coordinating that across all levels. We've got some really great initiatives now at a federal government level, Net Zero Economy Authority, decarbonisation plans, but it's actually the support at the regional level that's missing. So there is money, there's a lot of money, and government, I think, is being quite clever about how it uses its funds through the Future Made in Australia Act, for example, CFC Arena, to attract private investment in, but trying to get the money to the projects on the ground that might not be at a scale in an environment where investors don't want to take a lot of risks, and to where it's needed is still a challenge.
And how can we overcome those funding barriers that you were talking about?
Well, we need to keep going and ramp up what's already there, the sort of big funding that's going into things like critical minerals, green hydrogen, renewable energy, things like the capacity investment scheme to get renewable energy storage, and I think that's working. We saw some big announcements from BlackRock for $650 million for a big battery in Wellington, for example. But the challenges we need to really address are how are we going to fund small and medium-sized enterprises that need less money, but actually also not just money, but also support around how they build their businesses to build out that supply chain, but also some discretionary funding for regions. We're getting a lot of councils who are saying, they want to come up with a plan, they want to take the reins, they want to coordinate people so they can attract more investment in. They can make it clear how people can get involved, but also invest in the things that are needed so industry can get set up. So it might be water treatment plants, it might be roads. So those things are the things that need a lot more targeted investment into the future.
Can you point us to some examples of where funding is getting to where it's needed and where help in general is getting to where it's needed? I'm particularly interested in, the sort of work that the Next Economy is doing on the ground.
Yeah, so we've seen some really positive things happening with, recent announcements by the Prime Minister, for example, the Future Made in Australia Act leading to investment in Alpha HPA, which is a medium-sized company in Gladstone, making components that are needed for renewable energy to be able to take off. And they're making different things like sapphire glass for LEDs and things like that. So there was a big announcement there. There's a really great initiative down in the Hunter called Melt Ventures that is actually investing in the sort of supply chain, the small and medium-sized enterprises that are needed for the big manufacturers to be able to operate. So they find local businesses with manufacturing capacity and then really work with them to take the ideas that they've got through to commercialization. So it's that seed funding and mentoring and training that makes them able to attract in the VC capital private investment they need.
Now, from a purely financial perspective, will achieving a just transition have an impact on returns for investors?
Well, yes. I mean, the worst case scenario here is, we've got some big political shifts in the world. There's a lot of challenges still. This getting to net zero, even though there's a lot more movement now, is not locked in stone. And if we don't get the right investment at the right scale at the right time, so that we're not just funding the big industry, but all of the things around it that need it to happen, small and medium-sized enterprises, we talked about supply chain, but also some of the big infrastructure pieces that are needed, some of the other things like housing and social and care services that are needed that will either make or break whether or not we have even the workers attracted to the regions to, get these industries going. So if we don't get these investment pieces right, if we don't have that whole spectrum from sort of the more ethical impact funds that can take that risk all the way through to hard-nosed private investment flowing, this is just not going to happen. That's the biggest risk here. But if we do get it right and we're investing in the things that will set Australia up for the next 20, 30 more years, we're investing in the industries of the future. So there is definitely a return there. We definitely need government support because making this change is capitally intensive. But, it's going to reward the people who are willing to take that risk.
What are the emerging areas that need attention from investors more broadly?
Yeah, so that we're starting to see, we've seen for a while money going into renewable energy, and there's more, of course, needed, particularly around storage. We've got clear government priorities with money going into things like green hydrogen, critical minerals mining, metals processing, and some manufacturing around renewable energy. I guess where people need to be starting to think a bit more is some of the infrastructure needs around that and some more creative ways to fund, say, local governments around things like water treatment plants, infrastructure, transport infrastructure like roads and things that will be impacted by these things. But also other sectors. Agriculture is one where people are really starting to think about what is it going to take to decarbonise agriculture, which is massive. But we're going to need some really good, clever tech solutions as well as just getting people off fossil fuels and thinking about what does that actually mean and the role that agriculture can play in terms of drawing down emissions too. So it's starting to be talked about with the decarbonisation plans at a federal government level, but it's something where they're really struggling. I know that people are struggling to get investment to get that going.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Amanda. Where can people find out more about the Next Economy?
Visit our website. So it's just nexteconomy.com.au and stay tuned. We've got a few big launches of some projects we've been involved in later in the year, particularly some work around Mount Isa and the role it can play in decarbonising the world, and also in an agriculture-focused project in Hay and Carrathal. So we'll be releasing some reports over the next few months.
Until next time, I'm Rose Mary Petrass, and thank you for listening.
The Greener Way podcast is a product of FS Sustainability, a show about people, the planet, and investing in our collective future. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. The Greener Way podcast gives listeners access to information and educational content provided by discussing numerous financial sustainable options and our featured guests. It is not intended as a substitute for professional, legal, or tax advice. The hosts of The Greener Way are not financial professionals and are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the FS Sustainability website. fssustainability.com.au.